concept that is uniquely Catholic, and that has to do with our action. That we are a spiritual body, if you wish. That we are as real physically as we are spiritually. So in that way, there is a contradiction there. But it's the both end, and that allows us to look at our actions and what we do from a higher level and from two angles at the same time. And I think that's where, if you're looking at sexuality or in our topic here, you're looking at profit, it's a simpleton approach to look at profit and say this is good or this is bad. I think what we need to infuse into this debate is the Catholic approach of saying both and. Profit is a good thing. It depends on how much and how you do it and what you do it for.
Thanks for an eloquent thought. Wonderful parallel. So I immediately thought, okay, so if you're creating products, you want them to be for the good of the customer. How far along do you carry that sort of eternal protective attitude towards your customer? For instance, is it better to produce vitamins than, say, pipe tobacco?
How do you know I smoke?
That's all that side.
He knows me.
That's all that side. Let's leave aside the obvious cases, poison gas, pornography, okay?
Yeah.
But surely there are a lot of gray areas, like you produce slot machines, you produce tobacco, you produce Big Macs, right?
Yep.
And it's in your interest to maximize the profit, to urge people to indulge in something maybe more than it's healthy for them.
Yeah.
All your incentives are towards increasing the consumption, right?
Yeah.
McDonald's doesn't profit from people going and getting a salad and a little tiny burger. They profit from supersize.
Yeah.
Is there anything apart from big intrusive government, paternalistic government nudging people, that can reconcile this problem?
Yeah. That's a very good question too. My view of this is that there are intrinsically evil things. There's no useful use for pornography. There is a useful application for alcohol. Therefore, I would say you shouldn't produce pornography, but you have a right to produce alcohol, because that can be used well, right? So we have to distinguish between just intrinsically bad things. A knife, I like to use the knife as the example. You know, this morning I used a knife to butter Eli's bread in the morning, and that's a very good thing. I'm the father, I provide, I give him food. I could have taken that knife and killed somebody. It's not, a knife is intrinsically neither good nor bad. It's me, it's what I do. But there are some products that are intrinsically bad, yeah? And that's where I would draw the limit. As far as government is concerned, I do believe that the government is us. If it's done right, the government is us, and what we need to do in an economy, in a society, is to create an environment that brings down the hurdle, the transaction cost, that brings it down so it's easy for us to deal with each other. One way to bring down transaction cost is to live in a society that has laws and enforces them. So we know that if somebody cheats you, you can go somewhere and get a recourse, right? And so I think that is one of the roles of government, to say, we do this and we don't do that. If you lie in a contract, you do this. If your product blows up in somebody's face, we will come after you. That stuff is uniquely the role of the government, and I think they have a right to establish laws to regulate how we deal with each other with products and business and so forth.
Yes.
You make the comparison between theology of the body and entrepreneurship, and I know that you never stated that it's a flawless comparison.
Yeah.
But you just discussed the three goods of marriage. Also, in theology of the body would be the idea of contraception. And how would you relate that to entrepreneurship?
I don't know. That's a good one. I'm going to have to think about that.
Government contracts.
Yeah, contracts. Yeah, I haven't thought about
Again,
this.
I know that you didn't state
Yeah.
that it's but it might make a good second.
Andreas, I'd like to.
Yeah, give it a shot.
I think that's where the church's position, and you find it in the recent encyclicals on speculation, which is, has some complexity to it, because there are some good uses
Yeah,
to
very good
speculation,
point.
hedging, But in Centesimus Annus, which I'm going to ask you, is, you know, John, it seems to be that's the first place, as with the evolution of sexuality, John Paul,
Yeah.
he has a very articulate section about economic initiative and how an entrepreneur puts together the factors of business and how this is a good thing. That he also talks about making money, you know, that does as a result of non-productive activity.
Yeah.
It's not a result of creating something.
Very
So
good point.
speculation seems to
Yeah.
me similar to pure sexual pleasure for its own sake that doesn't have the good of the person involved.
You know, Hernando de Soto, I don't know if you know him, his latest book is about the financialization of the economy, and he points out that these derivatives and derivatives of derivatives and funds of derivatives, one of our basic rules in business is that in order for us to do business, it needs to be clear whose chair this is. Otherwise, we can't do business with each other. If it's, is it yours or is it mine? Because if it's mine, I'm going to sell it. And if it's yours, you can sell it. And we need to know property rights, the law of property. With these derivatives, it becomes the same chair can be multiplied by 8 times theoretically, and then it becomes not clear anymore whose it is. The financialized size of our economy, De Soto, if I'm not mistaken, says is 8 times the size of the actual economy. 8 times where we don't know whose this is anymore. This is like shooting our foot off. And the church would say, when you do this, you're starting to take man out of the center of the economy. The economy, let's not forget, exists for us, not we for it. And by doing speculation only for speculation's sake, we start to lose track or the vision of who man is and why the economy should serve man and not man the economy. And I think maybe that's an analogy. It's a really great question. I'm not going to sleep tonight. I'm going to have to think about it. Next book. Yeah. Next book.
I have a question because I had a recent dialogue with a friend of mine, younger than me, that after having spent a couple of years in New York in a startup business, it was not working well, it was very tired and stressed out, he was originally from California, so he got an interview, he got hired by Facebook, so you can imagine how happy he was 5 months ago. So he came 2 weeks ago in New York, so we had lunch, we were in a diner, and he said, how is your work? And he said, oh, I'm very disappointed. I said, oh my God, why? But well, it's not challenging enough. It's, you know, I'm bored at work, etc. Besides the fact that, okay, my own experience, 4 months is too a short period just to draw a conclusion. By the way, you're in Facebook, you know, you're the most advanced place where, you know, everything should be very exciting. So we had a discussion, said, but so what makes your job really interesting so that you're happy? And so we were thinking a little bit, and then he said, well, it's not necessarily money, and doing business will not be profit. You know, you can be a competitor between doing business and working because it's exactly the same thing. So I believe that what makes really a job interesting is the fact that it's challenging my capacity. So we were in a diner, and he said, okay, let's turn and look at the people that are preparing sandwiches all day long, doing this type of activity. Would you say that their job is uninteresting? Would you say that their job is not really valuable? Would you say that their job is kind of a curse? That could not be right. So my question, and I believe that we really do not have a real profound conception of what does it mean to work anymore. This may be part of the problem. But in your experience, what made your job interesting?
What made my job interesting was my growing in my skills and attaching meaning to my work. At some point, there's no job where everything you do is challenging you, because eventually you become good at it, or you get a proficiency in it that it's not, you know, get pattern recognition, it's not that challenging anymore. But I think one of the things that makes a huge difference is the meaning of the job. So that when I was involved in a company called Dragon Systems, where we developed the technology that you now have on the cell phone and everything, where you can talk to your computer, yeah? And what was really, in the worst times of it, what we would share among each other in this company was the customer testimonials of people who were handicapped and could never have typed. And they sent us something saying, look, I can communicate with the world, I can write and everything, even though, I have a handicap and I couldn't do it otherwise. And that was enough for us to get meaning out of what we do, to say, you know what, I'm going to do one more round. And even though it may have been boring to do what you were doing that day, it got you that extra initiative. There's this famous story about the stonemason, right, who sits in the middle of Paris 500 years ago or 300 years ago, and the philosopher keeps walking by and sees this guy every day and sitting in the dirt and chiseling away and everything. Is just the most horrible thing about this guy goes and has his coffee and this guy sits in the dirt. And eventually the philosopher stopped and said, you are the most wretched poor dude that I've ever met. Okay, come with me and I'll get you a coffee and we'll dust you off, and it's so, I can't even watch you, this is so miserable. And the guy looked back at him and saying, what, are you crazy? I'm building a cathedral here. And the philosopher never thought of this. But this man sitting in the dirt, chiseling away, had the end in mind. And he knew that what he was working is a cathedral to the glory of God. And that made all the difference. So if I know people who clean the floors. If you clean the floors for the glory of God, then this never becomes boring. And it doesn't matter what your job is. That's what distinguishes us. That's why we can work and animals can't work. It's because, think about it, physically we're very much the same as animals, yet they can't work. So it can't be a physical difference between work and not work. It has to be something that we have that the animals don't. And what we have that the animals don't is the higher stuff. That we can attach meaning to what we do. That we can do something with a purpose, with an intention, with a goal. With attaching meaning to our actions. And I think that's, when we see that, then we come to the core of what work is really about. Work has to do with meaning. It's the imitation of God.
Could you, do you mind going to the microphone?
I'm starting an online business, and my product is made in the United States. So since I'm just starting, I'm learning as I go, and I priced it hopefully to be affordable for people, but I'm figuring out that, I don't know what a distributor would percentage what they would get, so I may have, not priced my product, fair enough for me to make a profit. But I was talking to somebody who was a friend of a friend of a friend, and she was interested in my product, but she said, we do this, it has to be a product under $40. And I said, oh no, and she said, well, we would make your product in China. And I said, no, I'm sorry, I don't want to deal with China. I'm making it here, and I have a different agenda. But I did say to her, I have some other ideas. Of course, I gave her my ideas, but I said, my manufacturer's in New Jersey. I said, let me know what your profit, what your expectations are and if it's something we could do, we could all work together, and your product would be made in the U.S. And I'm going to come across this because naturally I have to, it's more expensive for me to buy than it would be in China.
Yep.
So I don't know.
May I ask what the product is?
Okay. Well, I'm a dog groomer. I work with animals, but I developed a litter box screen to cover a plastic litter box because I have cats. Yep. And I don't like looking at it. And I thought it would be a good solution if you like your apartment or whatever, and it would afford a cat also privacy.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing. But I'm doing it. It's all made by hand. Everything is made in the U.S. It's silk screen, the design, whatever. And right away she said, oh, we would do it in China, and we wouldn't do it. And I'm like, okay, but there's a person, they could do it.
Yeah.
I mean, and before I even get started, somebody could easily take the idea, go to China, and
God love you for what you're doing. So my hats off. This is a great initiative, and I applaud this effort. what I think is what the person you're talking to is looking at the market too simplistically. They're looking at a market as if it was one blob in front of you. The first thing I would do as an entrepreneur is to segment the market. There are people who will want their litter box from the United States. See, money is created as a function of value. You see, money isn't created by the Fed, even though we behave as if it was right now because they're printing like it's going out of style. Money is created when I come to you and I say, would you want this product? And it costs me a certain, and if you pay, to you it's worth more than I paid for. That value to you is a created money that didn't exist before. That value that is on top of what it cost me is how money is made. Therefore, if we trade, the more we trade with each other, the more money there is. What the poor need, I spent the last 10 years working as entrepreneurship as a solution to poverty in places like Africa and so on. What the poor need, and this is also the inspiration of John Paul, what he would say, the poor don't need a handout. For economic issues, for humanitarian issues is a different thing. For economic issues, to be poor shouldn't be measured by $1 a day. It should be measured that the poor, he said, are excluded from networks of productivity and exchange. Think about this. Being poor means to be excluded from networks of productivity and exchange. Your connection there is a network of productivity or exchange. That's what you're looking for. So taking a step back, you need to find a customer that is willing to pay, that values your product enough that they will pay you, the manufacturer in the United States, and the distribution system, right? That's what you need to do. The way you go about this is to segment the market and start, what I think you're doing well is because you own cats, right?
Yes.
You saw a problem and then created a solution for it. What the most entrepreneurs make as a mistake is they create a solution and then they look for a problem to solve, right? But you didn't do that. So I think you stand a good chance to actually, because this is good for you, there are other people like you. And that you care that this is made in the United States, there are other people like you. It's a segment, it's a market segment. The question is, how do you reach those people? And thank God for the internet, because now you can find any segment in the market just doing that. Do you really need a distributor? Just as a question, is there a way to market this to people who want an innovative product for their cats, grooming, and need this to be in the United States? Maybe there is something that you can sell along with it. See, a lot of the value that we add to a product has to do with branding and marketing and the image of the thing. And if this is something that helps the local economy, there's something you can play there. Don't try to be everything to everybody. That's one, maybe Walmart can do this, but they can't even do it because the high end won't go by there. So try to find your niche. And if somebody says, well, we won't do that here, great. You know they're not your customer. Find somebody who values it. And set yourself a time limit. I believe that it's very difficult to discern if God wants you to do this product and how long. You're not opposed to suffering if God wants this as a growth. But sometimes entrepreneurs have a tendency to stick too long with something. Like, when you start, we all know people like this. They just hold on to this idea and will not let it go. Part of being discernful about this is to say, what's a reasonable amount of time that I can do this? I like to challenge God in the sense of saying, look, I'm going to give this long. If you send me some kind of feedback that I should keep going, I will, but you have to tell me. And so set yourself a year or 2 years or whatever you think is appropriate, and then say, this is how long I'm going to give this project, and then I go to the next. The highest, another thing that John Paul would say in Centesimus Annus, see, the greatest value in this economy is not that cat litter box. It's your mind that came up with it. And if you came up with the cat litter box cover, there's 50 more ideas in you. I just saw this. Did you see this? It's funny. Did you see the Jay Leno interview with George W. Bush, where he gave him the painting, and he says, and George W. goes to Jay Leno. He says, are you a painter now? And he says, yes, I'm a painter. And he says, how did you become a painter? And he says, well, I met this painting teacher, and I went to her and I said, teach me how to paint. There's a Rembrandt in here somewhere. That's a good approach, but put a time limit on it.
Yes.
see.
I'm a graphic designer, and now preparing to launch encouragement greeting cards about love for the emotionally injured. And I haven't decided if I want to go for profit or non-profit. And on the other day, I was talking to a professor at Baruch College, and she told me that for profit, usually success can be measured by money, and for non-profit, success can be measured by if we can change people's behaviors. And so, from your point of view, what's the definition for non-profit?
Both and. I myself have a very strong view that I don't really think that anything other than things like the church and organizations, benevolent organizations like that, should be non-profit. And even they are not, there's no such thing as non-profit. There is something, what are you going to use your profit for? That's what it's really about, isn't it? If you don't make profit, you're going to sink. If this organization here, they make profit by getting donations. Somebody has to make this up. Like, this costs something. So the question is not, are you for profit or not for profit? Are you against profit? No, everybody needs profit. The question is, what do you do with your profit? And can you change, how much good did we do at Dragon Systems to help people speak to their computer? Was that, I always say, if those other people are social entrepreneurs, what am I? Chopped liver? I mean, we changed, every entrepreneur changes thousands of lives, millions of lives. I think what we need to be able to do is I don't want to create a special class of business people and say, those are the good guys. Because what you intrinsically do then is to say, these guys, they're the bad boys. They get away with this. No, business is supposed to do good, right? We can hold two thoughts at the same time. We can make a product that is good for everybody and creates value because you really value it. The question is, what kinds of products do we make profit with? And that's something that we shouldn't, that debate we shouldn't take out of the for-profit world and go into the non-profit world. We should have this debate in New York, to say what is a good product and what isn't a good product. Profit is something that, profit is what a company needs, like your body needs red blood cells. Are you thinking about your red blood cells right now? Because if you don't have them, you die, right? But you're not standing there saying, where are my red blood cells? Let me produce red blood cells, produce. No, but if they would stop being produced, within 2 days you'd be dead. That's profit. That's profit to the company. Does the company exist saying, make profit, make profit, make profit? No, because it doesn't work like that. Do a good product. Create a good product. Find people who really value your product, where you create a good product for demanding customers that are willing to pay a premium for it, value. When you do that, your product your company will flourish. What you do with your profit afterwards is something that you should decide afterwards. In a non-profit, I often think in a non-profit, how do you determine whether to give somebody a raise or not? In a for-profit, if you have profit, you can decide, I take this much, I give it to the investors. This much, I raise your salary. This much, I invest back into the property and equipment. Every company needs to do that. We need to stop looking at the for-profit and not-for-profit. It's a wrong dichotomy. Every company is for-profit. But it's not the essence of what you do. Just like it's the role of your body isn't to produce just red blood cells. Yes.
I have a question. I noticed that somewhere I read on the website or something, you have some connection with Uganda.
Yeah, Rwanda.
Okay. Well, I do have a question, but I just want to let you know, I went there about a year ago with Engineering Ministries International.
Yeah.
And I worked with Wellspring. Are you familiar with them?
A little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm an engineer. I'm still an engineer. And we're a group, a team that in Africa to help this
Thank you. I did do a lot of work in Rwanda. One of my companies was a business strategy consulting firm that focused on business strategy in post-conflict societies. How do you kickstart the economy in Afghanistan or in Rwanda, in Eastern Europe, in Macedonia, Serbia, and so on. And I think I have a lot of hope in how this works. Let me first get the genocide thing out of the way. I've been to Rwanda many times. I've spent a lot of times in Rwanda. We had an office there and employees, and I know the president of Rwanda very well, Paul Kagame. I'm telling you, the more I get to know them, I'm Swiss, and so the Germans are right next to me. If the Rwandans can do it, if the Germans can do it, the Rwandans can do it, and then the Americans can do it. The line between us and genocide is this thing. It's not, these are not savages. Huh? These are not savages running around in the bush with machetes. These are very sophisticated thinking people that when we start to make arguments personal rather than theoretical, and we say that the person is what's guilty rather than the actions of the person, eventually somebody gets killed. John Paul would say that a great insight I learned from him is that he says we should stick to the issues rather than people. There's two approaches to problems in the world. One approach is to see the person, the people, as the problem. And the other way is to look at the people as the solution. There's a movement going on around the world that says there's too many of us. We're polluting the world, there's too many of us, and we're running out of space. You know what the other shoe is? When the other shoe drops, you know what we're going to do? We're going to have to kill somebody. Just, not usually the person who says it. That they're usually excluded. It's the other people. And usually it's the poor because they're being regarded as dumb and sub. Look at how we deal with poverty. We look at them as subhumans. That's very, very dangerous. And that's in a utilitarian world where we only look at productivity as a value and not dignity as a human value. Eventually we're going to start to kill people. We're doing that here now. It's just we do it with abortion and not quite with people who are out of the womb yet. So to that, genocide is a real threat at any given time in any society if we don't keep things together. John Paul would say there's three things that a prosperous society needs. It stands on a stool with three legs. The first one is a free economy. The second one is a rule of law. And the rule of law needs to be enforced by a participatory form of government. That doesn't mean American democracy or Swiss democracy. It's a participatory form of government that you have something to do with how this works. So we have the rule of law, we have the free economy, and the third leg of this stool is what he calls a public moral culture. If we let go of the public moral culture, the other two things set free such tremendous forces that eventually they threaten to self-destruct the society. So if we let go of the public moral culture, we are basically condemning ourselves. And that's, in a place like Rwanda, I'm seeing that that's what they're investing in, the public moral culture. To come out of it, you never see happier people than there. People who want to see the solution, who are positive, who work for change. As far as the area of sub-Saharan Africa, I believe that the next great economic boom comes from Africa. Look at Nigeria. Nigeria has as many people as Europe, as one country. How many TVs do you have at home? How many times did you fly this year? How many shoes do you have? You have a car, you have a motorcycle, you probably have a bicycle and a car. Well, those people don't. The economy only works when we trade and buy and sell stuff. Well, if we want to go trade and buy and sell stuff, eventually we should sell to them. The big fallacy here in the people are the problem is actually that the people are the solution, because the more people there are who consume and buy and do stuff, the higher the economy goes. Very soon this is going to turn around, and countries with fewer people are going to do worse, and countries with more people are going to do better, because the basic principle of economics is that the more people and the more trade we do, the more prosperous we become.
But you need natural resources.
Yeah, so then you talk about lack of infrastructure, lack of schooling and everything. Let me remind you that America didn't start with schools. Harvard, Princeton, Yale, all started when America was already prosperous. When this was an outpost of the English Empire and the people who started our country here, you couldn't go to Harvard. You were you had to learn this stuff yourself. It's not a chicken and egg question. We know that prosperity comes first, and then the higher education and all of that comes. And I believe that economic activity comes first, and then the roads and all of that comes. Look at our own country of how this happened. It always happens like this. People are the solution. Poor people we should look at poor people not as a problem. We should look at them as people with unfulfilled potential. He says, John Paul talked about the suffering. He says, don't make a mistake. It's okay to fight suffering, but don't fight the sufferer. Don't make the mistake that thinking if you kill the sufferer, you got rid of suffering. Let's not make the mistake to kill the poor and think we solved poverty.
I'm going to wrap up with one question. I don't want to end without putting a plug in and ask you to talk a little bit about the church's document, Vocation of the Business Leader, which came out a couple of years ago, a distillation, in essence, of Caritas and Veritate. And just in terms of this issue, how do we reform the economy, and how the document talked about the divided life as Christians living a divided life and not bringing their faith into the economy, into the workplace, as one of the contributors to the type of world economy that leads to a collapse.
Yeah. The divided life is a critical issue. Just in the debate that's going on right now, I just want to give you an example of how schizophrenic our society is right now. We have a new healthcare law, and I don't want to talk about the law itself. I want to talk about the logic of how this is being implemented. The healthcare law exists, and it says we give an exception for religious objection to churches, but just to churches. In the private sector, that's secular. You can't have any religion in there, so you're not going to get an exemption, right? That's the theory of how America is trying to implement this law. To say religion doesn't have a place in business, it has a place in the churches. Now let's talk about the public moral culture. Why do we have laws? Why do when business? If we listen to the popular debates around the country, we say that there are some people in business that are just wretched human beings, and what needs to happen is we need to increase the virtue of business people, isn't it? We say the law is just the basis, but we need to go beyond the law. What we need is more non-profit companies or something. You know, we need people with a halo trying to do business. There's too much corruption in business. There's too many people who just take it all, who go for the jugular and just are completely only money driven. What we need to do is get people more virtuous. Well, let me ask you, where do people get virtue? What's the common form of how we get virtue? Who teaches us virtue? Churches. Let me get this right now. We're saying that churches have no business your faith has no business in business, but on the other hand, we want you to be virtuous. It's an oxymoron. We're getting this wrong.
For many years, and now I'm a nurse educator. So I teach nursing administrators. Who's going to be the next generation of nurse administrators? And what you just said, I'm writing an article, and I keep looking at it, about virtuoso nursing, because I truly believe in healthcare. You know, healthcare is a business. You see the advertisements on, for come here for your cancer. It's like, as if it's a vacation or something. Yeah. So healthcare is a business, and nurses in the hospitals are being really instrumentalized right now. We're given scripts. I mean, I'm not anymore because I'm not a staff nurse, but I hear from my students that they're given scripts of what they can say to the patient, what they can't say to the patient. So their ability to be even therapeutic is taken away from them, because if they say something one way, we used to say to a patient, like, we're leaving the room, is there anything else that you need? You're not allowed to say, is there anything else that you need? You must say now, is there anything else that I can do for you, because I have the time? Because if you say to the patient, I have the time, then the patient will remember on their evaluation of their hospitalization, in then they'll get a higher prestige sport, and they'll get more Medicare money, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, the nurses have said to me in class, I feel like a liar, because A, I don't have the time, and B, if I say I have the time and the patient asks me for something that is not even relevant for nursing, like I need a newspaper, I can't say, well, I'll send the nursing attendant with the newspaper, because I just said I have the time, so I must go and get the newspaper. So, you know, listening to what the students are telling me in their own situation, I myself, you know, have been thinking for a long time about this issue of the expert nurse. The expert nurse, everybody wants to be an expert, and I'm teaching in graduate studies, I'm teaching in the doctoral program, I am teaching people who are operating at a very high level of nursing. And the hospitals are kind of pushing them down so that they will be like these little, you know, similar to an IV pump. You know, you'll do what I say when I say it, the way I say it, and the way that I want it. Not that you're a valuable professional and go do that. So what you have just said about creativity and love, I mean, this is what I taught all last spring and what I will be teaching again next spring. You are going to be nurse administrators. You have to treat the staff and all the people that you're dealing with love. You have to come with virtues. You have to read St. Thomas Aquinas and find out what those virtues are. And you have to bring that to bear on what you're doing. And as I started to write this article about virtuoso nursing, comparing like Six Sigma methodologies which are used in healthcare so that we can get down to the least little defect and get all those defects out. Where is the defect in the human person? If a person makes a mistake, that's like a defect in that system. Get rid of the person. Whereas I'm trying to tell the nurse administrators of the future, if you see that there's a defect in the person, you can't get rid of the person. You have to help the person become a more virtuous person and become not an expert, but a virtuoso of what they're doing. You know, appeal to their excellence. This is really what it's all about. So we had such a great opportunity to hope and to learn from him. I mean, I've learned from him by reading his writings, but I guess I don't know his writings as well as you do. And but I really think this is essential in our society today.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, thank you, Andreas Widmer.